this edition of Optimal Talks. In this series of frank conversations, I will chat to a diverse range of security specialists and industry influencers to explore their opinions and ideas, picking apart some of the key issues we all face today. I hope you enjoy the next 30 minutes. If you do, leave us your thoughts and comments and spread the word. Thanks.
Good morning, guys. Lovely to see you. Bright, smiling faces. Two very good friends with me today. Thomas of the Institute fame, and Garry Evanson, who I've known for the longest time, head of security at Westminster Abbey, formerly the chair of the Security Institute when I started at the Security Institute, and still somebody I see frequently now. How are you guys doing this morning?
Absolutely excellent,
yeah.
Rick.
Great, thanks.
Great.
Yeah, no problem.
You both look like you are thriving in retirement, and this is why we are here today. Just to recap for those that maybe haven't seen these webinars are themed within security. We have security professionals on every session, but the topics are outside. They're of interest to you as human beings, but they are also embedded in security. But today we are here to talk about retirement planning. We have two people here who are probably the busiest people I think I've ever met in my career, that are now retired, but not actually that retired. And I think there's a lot we can learn in hindsight from their retirements, the plans up to, and the things they've learned since started, right? So I think it's really important initially if we can just understand the intricacies of your career pathway. So I'm gonna go very diplomatically to my left first. Ladies first. Tell us where your career in security started. I know this obviously, but your career started and your whole life footpath, please.
Okay, all right, good. Hello everyone. My career. My working time started in administration, and had various different jobs in the past. And I spent a good chunk of my time doing basic secretarial administration with originally Rakel, and then of course it became Thales. And one day I was sitting in the office just outside the director's office, and unfortunately the gentleman that looks after health and safety and site services had died in service. And one of the things he was also responsible for was security. And they were busy sculling round a whole list of employees as to who they could immediately throw into the security role, because being a List X site, they had to have somebody nominated to do that. I remember overhearing the whole, well, why don't we ask Di if she could do it? She's nasty enough, which I kind of, to me, was kind of a, perhaps they mean firm, assertive. Let's just go with that.
Let's go with assertive.
Yeah, assertive. So that was the start of my security career. Really, was an opportunity to step into dead man's shoes, unfortunately, but learn on the job. I'd been probably one of the worst people of not obeying the car parking rules, not wearing my ID pass, tailgating through access control doors, all the stuff we all know we shouldn't be doing. And I very quickly realised that security was an incredibly interesting and diverse opportunity, and it would take me out of being somebody's secretary. And so it wasn't as if I was desperate to have a career in security, but I was desperate to make an impact for myself as myself doing my job. Fast forward a number of years, I looked after security for Thales sites. Thales then outsourced security to their own facilities management company. Did that for 5 years in a head office environment, which again, very much thinking on my feet. But that brought me into the quality environment, customer services, client liaison, newsletters, IT systems, all sorts of stuff. Again, still looking after security. And I got to the point where if I'm honest, I was a bit tired because I was being sent all over the country, 78 different sites to look after, liaising with Europe as well. And I just thought, I need to get off this rat race. So I looked around for something else, found a job advertised by the Security Institute for their general manager post. Brand new post, nobody had ever done it. And they were looking for somebody to run all the back office systems and to help the Institute grow. And for somebody that does administration in a security environment with no boss, apart from the board of directors, but hey, they're the board of directors. It was a great opportunity, I thought, to use the skills I'd already learned, work from home 3 days a week, get paid a similar salary to what I was already being paid for 5 days a week. And that's how I started with the Institute. I was with the Institute for 16 years and ultimately retired at the end of October, a year or so ago, year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And during that time with the Institute, did all sorts of fantastic things, made a load of great acquaintances. And that really is my security journey, my employment journey. I don't have a degree. And to be honest, I feel, Rick will know this, I feel as if I've largely blagged my way through my career into various roles, but based on being in the right place at the right time and hopefully having the right skills.
So I think actually you hit the nail on the head. When you were going through your responsibilities at Thales, and I was thinking you could have been talking about the Institute right now. But quality management was definitely, your strength was in attention to detail, was phenomenal and a huge handrail for me. I know that. Gary, let's come to you. Tell us where you started and ended up.
Well, I think mine's very different in most respects. I didn't get a degree because I didn't go to university. So I sort of left home. I came from a council estate, sort of a pretty rough council estate as well, and got a place at Sandhurst, which surprised my father no end, absolutely no end, because he'd always said to me, "Oh, join the army, it'll make a man of you." But he meant to actually join at the bottom end, and not sort of. So I sort of went one better, or at least in my own head went one better, to actually prove to him I could do greater things. And didn't really know what I was getting myself into, to be honest. But got through Sandhurst and did a full career pretty much, with a break in the middle. And you, Rick, will know, but lots of people won't. I was a professional opera singer for a while in the middle, for about 8 or 9 years, and did that, and then came back into the military at the sort of major level, the rank I'd left at, and then eventually left as a lieutenant colonel. And I really carried 2 cap badges because in my regular service I'd done Royal Military Police and served in the usual places, Sierra Leone, Iraq, Bosnia, all those sort of things, as Provost Marshal in those 3 countries. But whilst I was actually singing opera, a lot of people don't know, I was actually in the TA, and I was an RLC officer and reached half colonel in that as well. So I've been a half colonel in the RLC and in the RMP. So I'm quite proud of those two ranks, because actually I'd gone from retiring as a major, came into the TA as a captain, got to major, got to lieutenant colonel, came back into the regular army as a major, and then made lieutenant colonel again. So I was up and down like a yo-yo. But it means you can't keep a good man down. That's what I always say to people. I think I'm just incredibly fortunate, to be honest, in the right place at the right time, in my own head. So that was my sort of military career. And just as I was coming up to my final year, more or less in my final year in the military, I heard about a job going in De La Rue, which are for those who don't know, are the manufacturers of banknotes and passports and tax stamps. So quite a high security enterprise. And I sort of blagged my way into their organization as sort of head of security, initially for currency, the banknote side. But after 4.5 years, I'd worked my way up into being group head of security for the whole organization. And I was very, very sort of happy with them. It's a very, very high tempo environment, very commercialized. And although security, of course, was a golden thread running throughout the organization, it still had a bottom line to reach. And obviously there was always a bit of difficulty in getting the funds and the money necessary to have the adequate and correct security within the organisation. But they were a very family-oriented firm. They loved their staff, still do, and I'm still very fond of the organisation. But as things happen, I joined the Institute, worked my way up to be chairman of the Institute. And whilst I was holding a board meeting one day, I heard that the Westminster Abbey was looking for a chartered security individual. Well, I think at the time there was only 13 of us in the world. So the cast was quite small. Now, the Abbey didn't know that, but I thought I'd be interested in this job. So I actually made some inquiries, and I was a little bit worried that the Abbey didn't really know what it wanted. It could be a complete dud of a job, or it could be the best job in the whole world. But after some interviews with a headhunter, I had an unofficial chat with my boss, Stephen Lamport, at the time. And Stephen actually did tell me exactly what he wanted, which really was somebody like me. So I sailed through the board of that. I went through 3 different board interviews for the job, and found myself as the head of security initially at the Abbey. But Evanson, being Evanson, wasn't content with that. He wanted to do other things as well. So I took on the business risk portfolio after the first year. I also took on the fire portfolio. And I also took on the business continuity portfolio. So I started to sort of do a bit of empire building. And then in the final 3 years of my job there, because I was with them nearly 10 years, in fact, at the Abbey, I also did insurance. And for all those people out there in security, if you can get your hands on the insurance portfolio, take it. Because the levers you can use in the security world, when you've got insurance under your remit as well, you'd be surprised how well that can work for you. And then, of course, COVID came along. And as I said, I've been with the Abbey nearly 10 years at this stage. Well, in fact, 9 years at this stage. And that meant a lot of the time I was working from home. And I think at that stage, because I was already hitting 68, I thought, well, do you know what? The idea of commuting on the train back to Westminster every day is not a thing I'm looking forward to. The job I love, but the travelling not so much, and that's nearly 3 hours of your day. So a year into COVID, I thought, I'm nearly 69 now. I think I better just start thinking of what am I going to do. That's when I started thinking, what am I going to do in the future? Do I really want to go back on this train journey every day? And there was one thing that was keeping me thinking yes, and that was because of Queen. Coronation, everything else. Right. Yeah. And she's got another 5 or 6 years left in her yet, so I can't take that chance. So I said to my boss at the time, if I give you 6 months' notice, would that be okay? Because I think really I just need to retire and see out the rest of my life. And he said, let me think about it. Came back a week later and said, okay, we can work a deal on this, but I need your help to recruit the next, the next head of security sort of thing. So that's how it worked out. And of course, lo and behold, I retire, and then the Queen does what she does. And and now we're into coronation stage, which I'm going to miss out on, which unfortunately is my only regret. But yeah, that's my journey so far. And amongst all that, as you know, Rick, I've been chairman of the Institute. I was a trustee of victim support for 9 years. And also chairman of the Royal Military Police Association in Hampshire for, coming on 18 years now. They were for a bit.
I think this is really important. I think, and I think a question, you have to forgive me as it goes through. What strikes me is both of you have gone through your careers as with a focus on why you were doing that job, how you did it, and what you did were kind of it's the golden circle, the Simon Sinek's golden circle, but the core of why you did it. For Di, what I hear is, and what I know is, the membership experience, the value that the Institute brought, that was absolutely a passion for you. That was your why. What we did at the Institute and how we did it was, fell out of the core belief that why we were doing it was really important. And Gary, what you've just expressed is, the family ethos at De La Rue, this is critical national infrastructure. And then the move to the Abbey, I could feel that was the right thing for you to do, because it kind of played into every other strength around, you know, your love for the singing, the environment that you were in. It fitted your personality. And I know you bedded right in there, but the why, you were protecting something that I know you was very important to protect. So that protective instinct became your why, and how you did it by taking on insurance and health and safety and everything else was I see this golden circle sometimes. It's very obvious in certain people as to why they thrived in the environment they were in, but both of you had a really strong why. Now, when you take away the why, what does that leave you with? How do you find your why now? And it may be in your friends and family, it may be in the things that you're doing now. So tell us now, Di, what you do now. How do you maintain some of that why?
Okay. I think it's important to understand that the reason why I decided to retire when I did, or started planning for it early, was largely based on the fact that my husband Peter is 15 years older than me, and a lot of my family are of that age group or older. A lot of my social group are that age or older. I think, in fact, when I look at my immediate close circle of friends, only one of them is the same age as me. They're all significantly older. So I think I always knew for many, many years that I would probably retire early, because if I stayed working until 60, 65, 66, 67, yeah, whatever the state retirement age is for somebody and me at the moment, that was going to, all my friends would be sort of getting on towards 80, and I'd be the nominated, wheelchair pusher or whatever.
Right. Right.
And so I always knew that I would be retiring early for whatever reason. I wasn't sure when that was going to be or what I would do when I retired. And I think part of what I always assumed I would do is what you've assumed that I would do, is put the energies that I used to put into my day job, put into hobbies, interests, projects, organising the family, organising my friends, sorting out social events, whatever. And in reality, I don't do anything like as much of that as I thought I would be doing. And part of the reason is they are a bit older and they don't need to be organised and pushed around. But you know what? I was absolutely whacked by the time I retired. I've got arthritis in both my knees and my back, and physically, I found doing my day job, whether it's sitting for 8 hours in front of a laptop or getting on the train and jumping to London, or whatever, I found that working a physical day I was very uncomfortable. Mentally, I found it difficult that if I wasn't working a full day, I couldn't cope with that, because I'm so used to doing, 8 hours and 10 hours and 12 hours and whatever was necessary to get things done to the standard that I wanted to do. So I was in a little bit of a pickle. And if I'm honest, I think I still am in a little bit of a pickle, because, my assumption was that when I retired, I would, do all sorts of other things. And in reality, I've got a much quieter life than I ever thought I'd be satisfied with, but I absolutely love it. I've got more, it sounds really stupid, but I've got time. I've got time to do nice things, like, if somebody's going to pop around for a cup of coffee, I can make a cake, for God's sake. I've known how to make cakes for 64 years, but when have I actually ever done it, So for me, my day-to-day things are very much enjoying some of the projects I've always wanted to do. And, I'm lucky that I've still got a Security Institute project that I've enjoyed researching for, and, delving into the history of things. And that sort of certainly kept me occupied for some time. But yeah, my day-to-day activities bear no resemblance to what my day job used to be, in terms of the pressure, the time, the stress, the engagement. But I love it, absolutely love it.
Yeah, good. I think actually, when we talked about in the period when you were leaving the institute, And you know what, I've got to say, it was hard for me, as in we really needed you there, but for you personally, I knew it was the right time, and I was pleased for you that you decided that was right for you. But then when I thought, how on earth is somebody like Di just going to stop? It's not possible. So the project you were talking to there about the history of the Institute, I think is going to be a really good piece of work. And I know that, you know, there's already so much of the early days has been catalogued and stuff. And I'm glad you two are back in touch, because Gary's going to add a lot of value to that project. When that comes out, it's going to be one of those things that nobody that was employed would ever be able to have the time to do it. It would take, it's almost like a full-time job, but because it's not a burning imperative, you've got lots of time to do it, but it'll be done right. And that's I thought it was a really good way of sort of going from your full-time to going to part-time, which worked really well, 3 days a week, to now retiring, but having something that just keeps you on a thread to an organization that, you know, you helped to build from the ground up.
I think it was really good not to go cold turkey for me, because it's been such a big part of my life for such a long time, but also because it's on my doorstep, and they are the staff that work there are my friends. I was still seeing them. I still see them. I went out for a curry with 2 of them last night, which is brilliant. And to be able to have something that was mine still, that I owned, meant that they were able to keep me at arm's length in terms of the things that they were doing. You know, I was interested, but I didn't want to interfere. And the way it was managed, I think, was really good, in as much as, you know, I had my interests, they had their day job, and it allowed us to actually maintain that friendship and that engagement, but without me stepping on their toes or saying, you know, whatever, you know what I'm trying to say. So yeah, that was, in hindsight, that was a really good project for me to have, and I've really enjoyed looking into it.
Gary, where do you find your why nowadays?
Well, when I was still working, I thought, do you know what? I want to retire early because I got so much to do outside of work. But I loved work so much. Didn't like the commuting, but I loved work so much that I could never see myself going at that year and that year. And in fact, I can tell you a little story. Every time I walked across Westminster Bridge, I used to say to myself, one day I'll be walking across this bridge to the Abbey, and I know the time will be right to leave. And of course, it never came because I was always going to work and enjoying it. It's COVID really that sort of changed the dial because of the commuting thing. Once I worked from home for a while, I realized that actually I didn't want to travel. So that was the real reason. But I think I always knew that because of the pro bono stuff I'd always done in the past, that interests were always there. If I could always dabble back into the security world if I really wanted to, even if it was on a consultancy basis. But also, I've got a little baby called a 40-foot yacht sitting in Hasler. So I always knew there'd be plenty to do on her because I've had her for 10 years, and you know she always needs work doing to her. So that was one area I knew I'd be doing lots of extra work. And also, I've always had a great bucket list of things to do, especially traveling. Well, COVID put a sort of stop to the traveling, but that will come. And I certainly still want to do travel in parts of the world I haven't been to. So the sailing and the traveling and a bit of pro bono were always in the mix there. But of course, life never quite turns out the way you expect it to be. It just doesn't. And it was that bucket list was great. It's still there. But I found that intellectually, to begin with, in the first year or so, I realized that if I wasn't careful, that I was not going to be stimulated enough intellectually to do what I'd always done in the past. I'd always either led a team or been a big contributor to a team. And those two things were missing. No matter how much I read, no matter how much I sort of engaged on the telephone or in meetings online, I wasn't part of it all, and I just wanted to get back into that intellectually. And no sooner had I thought that than somebody rang me up and said, I've got a cunning plan, which involves you. And that cunning plan really was to become a tutor. on an MSc course. So
Yeah.
months later, I found myself being the lead tutor for an MSc course, which actually has got nearly 40 odd students now. It had 50 for a while, but it's 40 because we've just dropped 2 cohorts post-dissertation. And of course, it was always sold to me as a part-time job, but like all these things, you end up doing almost full-time because you just do more. Whether that's paid or not, it doesn't really matter. It's all about the journey and giving back. And I like to think that throughout certainly the last 10, 15, 20 years, I've always tried to give back to the security sector as much as I possibly can, because to be fair, I've been a very lucky man. It's come my way without sometimes trying that hard. And I feel very grateful to the sector for all it's done for me. And therefore, I think it's absolutely right that if I can give something back a little bit, then that's the way to go. But also, in the selfish corner, it keeps my brain ticking over nicely. And I get to still talk to people like you and I, and lots of others too. And it's really stimulating to hear students who are sort of at the point in their career where they're thinking of doing academia, or they're sort of doing postgraduate studies, having done a bachelor's degree, and to hear some of their views on how the security sector is changing, and then to be challenged by me as their tutor and their dissertation supervisor as they go through that journey. And I've already seen some people go through almost the whole journey, and it's such a delight to see their improvement as they go. So I'm getting quite a lot of kick out of it, to be honest. In fact, I've probably been a secret academic all my life, even though I didn't go to university to begin with, and I did all my university work in my 50s, including a teaching degree, as you know. So at the end of the day, I've come to it all at the end of my career, but actually started almost. I'm probably here under false pretenses. I'm not really retired at all. I'm taking the pensions, but I'm not really retired. I'm still working, but I'm working under my own guises from home mostly. So it's great. And in fact,
you're a late bloomer.
Oh, late bloomer. And I'm actually going to Sydney, Australia, doing a couple of lectures in August. So that will be another, having done Hong Kong and Melbourne just before COVID. So yeah.
I think you have a lot to offer there. You bring in your you can't have a full career with the amount of experience and problem solving scenarios that you've lived through. It would be a shame not to feed that back into other professionals and then we're talking about master's programs. So when you say your students, they're all sort of fairly senior, I guess, or they're not new to the environment, right? Mixture. Okay. Yeah, a lot share. Sorry, Dar, you were going to say something there.
I was going to say that I think Gary touched on a very relevant point there in terms of your mental attitude to things. And in particular, I found it very difficult. A few months ago, I went through a phase of, I was used to being at home. And and I still wake up at 6 o'clock every morning, and I can't do the lying in bed till 8 or 9 or whatever. That's just not me. But mentally, I found myself struggling because there wasn't enough for my brain to do. I was going to bed and I couldn't go to sleep. I might be physically tired because I might have been out doing the garden or whatever the hell it was. Yeah. Mentally, because I'd not been using my brain in anything like the way that I used to, I found that very difficult and it took me quite a while to work out why the hell was I not sleeping, because I thought I was still being active enough. In fact, more active than when I used to work. And right. And when I actually sussed the fact it's because I couldn't stop my brain going, as long as I've got things to do that involve thinking, reading, researching, writing, whatever, I'm a lot better. But if you start to relax too much, if you're used to being busy in that, I don't think it's necessarily a good thing for you.
I think it's a really relevant point, right? Your brain is a muscle.
Yeah.
You've got to keep it sharp in some way. My dad is, pushing 80 now and still will finish a crossword faster than I can. Yeah. That's his thing. But I think how would you recommend to people to stay in that sort of mindset, that stay in the groove? I mean, you learned by feeling the physical manifestation of not being sharp in the mind, and then readdress that. Do you have a lot of self-awareness, Di? What would you say to people that, you know, are thinking about retiring now, and say, look, don't fall in the same bear trap I fell into. You need to keep from the beginning doing this. What would you say to them?
I think it sounds silly, but it's very easy to relax when you get home, and when you retire, you know, and if you haven't got anything that structures your days, or that takes you away from your house, or makes you, you know, get up and put a particular outfit on, and you slap on your face, and no, that's not you, Gary, obviously, and off we go. You know, to go to work or whatever. So staying involved with younger people, or with the work environment, or having something that disciplines you, that you need to think about and contribute towards, and that maybe has got some challenges in it, even if they're self-imposed challenges. I mean, one of the things that I've been doing is I've been setting up an online cookbook. Brilliant. I've now got 230 of my favorite recipes, all perfectly typed, nice little photograph, list of ingredients, and you click on each line when you've added an ingredient, you click on each line when you've gone through the method and you've built it. And you know, I can search on vegan, vegetarian, whatever. And this little project has really engaged me in terms of going through the vast piles of cookery books and old magazines and whatever. And I don't think it's necessarily what the project is. It's the fact that I've set myself a target, I've set myself a project. You know, I'm going to empty some cupboards and get rid of things that I don't use anymore, because, you know, I mean, you guys probably don't realize, but when you get a cookery book, you probably pick, you know, 3 or 4 recipes out of it, and you keep the book for those 3 or 4 recipes. Well, you know, that's ridiculous. These days, if I want to do anything, I tend to look for a recipe online anyway, and, you know, forget the book totally. So, but having a project, something like that, has really been a good thing for me to do, and I would recommend that to anyone. You know, if that you plan to have something to just get you started once you retire. Don't wait. Don't relax. I mean, I had the history project. I also had COVID that wasn't something I particularly planned for, but that impacted on what I chose to do. Literally the first day that I retired, I went down with COVID, and that wiped me out for 6 weeks or so. But yeah, have something lined up that you're looking forward to doing that engages.
Did you say that was online now? Is that something that other people can access, or is it just for you?
It's just me. There's an app that you can sign up for called, I think, Cookbook, but that you can put your own recipes into, and then once you're in there, you can actually share them with people, and you can actually download recipes from other online resources like BBC Good Food and stuff at the click of a button. So you know, and because I hate coriander, I know this is an essential part of this webinar, but you know, so every recipe I've come across, I typed in parsley. Brilliant, you know. So yeah, it's having a project for me was what solved the mental problem.
Would you concur, Gary? Do you have a routine?
Yeah, I mean, I have a routine, and it's very much based on the time I get up. It's like Di, I'm an early bird. I'm usually up by 6:30, certainly no later than 7, that's for sure. And after breakfast, it's very much checking the emails and then looking to see if I've got tutorials that day, or because I have to give webinars and things as well, and marking and so on. So that side of it, you know, let's say it takes 3 days a week on that side of it, and the rest of the time I can weave around looking after my boat. I've got a super nice car now as well, which another baby of mine. So
I've been in it. It's not a car; it's like a rocket, actually.
so that's another little project of mine. But of course, the traveling, I want to go traveling, and at the moment I haven't got the time. So terrible. I mean, they always say in retirement you should actually rest and relax, but I'm with Di on this. I think the graduated response is the way to go. Do as much as you want. If you're comfortable doing it, do it. The minute it becomes a chore, drop it.
Yes.
And that's the way to go. So I think the graduated preparation, I think it all starts, because you said earlier on, before we actually did the recording for this, when we first met again today, when did you start planning for your retirement?
Right.
Well, I think you start planning the moment you start looking at your pension and where that's going to take you. That's when you start planning it. And it might only be financial planning at that stage, but that is the key piece. And I know you're going to talk to Di about finances afterwards, but I would say to anybody out there, just make sure before you jump over that giddy line of a new life, make sure that your pensions are absolutely the way you want them to be, and you can sustain yourself. Because the last thing you want in retirement is to start struggling financially. Once that's out of the way, then fine. Then you do I want to carry on doing a bit of work? Do I want to carry on doing other things and projects like Di has mentioned? And so forth. And you structure your life around the wants that you want to do. The good thing about retirement is you're not at the behest of other people. You choose what you want to do when you want to do it. And yes, all right, it's not as simple as that, because if you take on part-time work, you've got a slight constrictor there. But at the end of the day, you can always walk away from it. You're not dependent on it. You do it because you want to do it. And that's the key piece. The graduated response, the graduated move into the new world, I think, is the way to go. I think jumping off a cliff and thinking life is going to be rosy because you've worked so hard all your life and now I'll just relax and retire. If you've got that in your head, I would start to say, question it quite a lot, because I think you set yourself up for a fall.
Right.
Yeah, you really do, because you might feel worn out. You might feel that you just don't want to do your job anymore or whatever. And everyone's circumstances are different. But it's amazing the change in your head that happens when you actually, for the last time, walk out of a job door.
How did that feel? Yeah. I mean, I know I was there when Di did that, but on a personal level, how did it feel to go wake up the next morning and go, I don't have a job anymore? I mean, can you prepare for that? How is it different from what you thought? I
think it's two aspects. I mean, it's loss and gain. You lose in one sense because either the company that you keep at work, the things that drive you every day, you've lived the job. For most of us, we live the job. It's not just a job, we live it.
Your purpose, yeah.
So you end up, that's the loss. The gain is you've got your freedom to do what you want to do, and you've still got the people as friends if you want to maintain contact with them. But there is a loss, definitely. Even though you know it's the right time, even though you wouldn't want to change it, there is a loss. But what I would suggest to people, just a way to look at this, is don't look at it as retirement. Look at it as, especially for those people who've done sort of jobs, every 4 years they change jobs or change careers. Think of it as the next change. It's the next transition.
Right.
And you mentioned about structure. That's build some structure into your new transition. Yeah. So for the first year, I'm going to do this. Well, the second year, I'm going to do that. By the third year, I'll have done that and I've knocked some off the bucket list or whatever. And if you find voids, okay, how do I fill this void? Di's found one with cookbooks and everything else and writing the history. My voids, if the sailing and the motoring and traveling don't work, I'll find something else to do. It might be more study, or it might be actually, a project for charity again. There's lots of outlets you can put your efforts and intellect into, and also your contribution of time. And time, is the thing that you have to a lesser or larger extent. That's the thing you will have to play with, is time. Yeah.
Would you say that you understood in your career what was your motivating factors? Now, Di and I, obviously, we did the Kilman motivational mapping. We know specifically from the research as to what motivated us. And do you think that during your career you knew what motivated you? Yeah. For me, for instance, it was knowledge. Gaining knowledge was my key motivator, learning different things, whether it be small or large. So I know I can take knowledge, a simulation, the books I read now about leadership management stuff, I can keep doing knowledge. Doesn't matter. It's not a physical thing. What motivated you in your career, and how do you fill that motivation gap now?
Well, I think mine And I only did that on reflection. I didn't really know when I was working what my motivation was, other than I either enjoyed something or I didn't. But I know now, when I've retired, what it was. It was self-worth.
Right.
Without a shadow of a doubt, the golden thread throughout my whole career has been if I would enjoy it, if I felt that I was fulfilling my own potential, and also that other people, to a larger extent, were actually seeing that worth in me.
Mm.
So it's slightly egotistical in one sense, with a small e, but actually self-worth. Money was always very secondary, because I gave up money to join the Abbey. I mean, I was on a bigger salary at Delarue, the Abbey, but it's the Abbey that drew me, because I thought, do you know what, I can contribute much more to that, and it will actually play to my inner feelings. So for me, it's very much about feelings and what I was bringing to the party. And if the other people I was working around and with felt the same, that was the golden thing for me. If the two things work together, I would always be happy.
There's another aspect I think I would offer to you, Gary, that you might not realise, is obviously the altruistic aspect of everything you did voluntarily. You've always been a giver of experience, a mentor to many, many people. And it doesn't surprise me that now you have fallen into a part-time job, technically, that is about giving knowledge. You know, whether it's in the army, with the RMP association that we co-chaired, that was all giving to other people. The Institute was giving, mentorship was giving. What you do with CSIP, the Chartered Security Professionals, is giving. I think that you've kind of fallen into now a role which is mirroring what you did through your whole career. That wasn't even your job; it was all the other stuff.
Yeah. You just mentioned the Chartered Security piece there, which I didn't even mention in my resume. But yeah, I'm a registrar for the Chartered Security side of life as well. Yeah,
exactly. And these are all giving things. Now, Di, you know, what about on your side of things? I know what motivated you. I think as having worked with you for the longest time, and I'll let you say, and then I'll maybe throw in my observations on that.
Okay. Well, I think when I was working, what motivated me was supporting people, helping people, getting things right. You know, I know I can be a pain in the arse when it comes to dotting I's and crossing T's and having things done, spelt properly and looking correct and stuff. But you know, I like standards, I like a bit of quality. But I also I think I particularly enjoy helping people, whether it's fellow workers, whether it's institute members that you know, trying to find a job or don't know how to fill their CPD thing in properly, or you know, or just need an ear to talk to and sit and have a chat on an exhibition stand or whatever. You know, I've met some fabulous people with the Institute, and for me, I think what makes, you know, when I come home from a day in London, for instance, you know, I will feel good because I have met people, I've talked to people, I've listened to people. Yeah, I do, you know, sometimes I do listen, you know, they can get a word in edgeways. But it's for me, I think it's important to support people, encourage them. And you know, everybody's got something to give, to donate, and it's often finding that and helping them themselves.
Yeah, no, funny enough, the two things I had in mind were quality. Everything with you. I mean, everybody, I always said this, every organization needed a Di Thomas. It was a North Star of quality. You couldn't get away. But then that's what built reputation. The quality management of everything that was delivered was always gold plated. And then the other aspect is people. You know, I think that a lot of the draw for this webinar will be people are really going to be interested in how you guys are getting on, because you are such big personalities in the industry. So, Di, you know, you are beloved, I think is probably the word, by everybody in our membership and beyond, because you always gave so much to everybody else, but you were always there. You know, you were not being disingenuous, but you were part of the security furniture. So how do you now fill that people and standards piece that you I was so intrinsic to your personality before.
Do you know?
I bet your garden's immaculate.
A bit of it. The bit I can see from the house is pretty damn good. Yeah.
No cookbooks lying around.
Yeah. Do you know what? I don't think I've got it right yet in retirement.
Okay.
It's one of the things I think you said earlier on, or Gary said earlier on, is when you first retire, you need to cut yourself some slack so that you can relax.
Good.
And the year that I retired, I left at the end of October. My last working day was on the train on the way home from the annual conference. So 10 o'clock. I worked till 10 o'clock at night that night, Rick. Thanks very much. But it was it was a very difficult year. It was the year that I lost my mum, and then dealt with all the probate, and then dealt with selling the family home and getting rid of all the things that had been in her home. And of course, she lived 150 miles away from me, so the journey back and forth in itself was not great. And then of course deciding to retire was my decision, but trying to decide what of 16 years worth of knowledge and activity is worth handing over and what is history and I need to keep, when it wasn't necessarily clear who things were being handed over to. So it wasn't, and that was all part of what the Institute was going through at the time. It was a very difficult year, and by the time I actually retired at the end of October, I was knackered. I was so tired. And then, that was the Thursday night on the way home. Saturday, I started with COVID symptoms, as did you, I know. And that wiped out November and half of December. And then, of course, you wake up thinking, oh, my life, it's Christmas. And, you sort of lurch through Christmas. And I got to the middle of January thinking, well, I'm still absolutely knackered. And, I've been retired for 2 months now, And so really, for me, last year was all about being nice to myself and allowing myself to, if I want to just read a book, or if I want to just sit in the chair in the garden and dribble and look at the plants, then fine, that's my choice. Knowing that at some point I would fix myself. I would start getting more involved in things. I would start working out that actually, for me, that kind of life is not sustainable. I need to get back involved with things. And you know what? I'm not sure I know what the answer is yet. As you know, Rick, I had the opportunity of doing some consultancy work literally within a week of retiring. And it was fantastic to think that somebody actually wanted my help and valued my experience. It was a really lovely shot in the arm, but it would have been totally the wrong thing for me to do. Because if I wanted to do that, I'd have stayed with the Institute. I love the Institute. No, I wasn't leaving because I didn't want to be there anymore. But it was right in terms of the next stage of the Institute's development. If I wasn't going to stick around for 2 or 3 years, it was a good time to go. So I don't think I'm as advanced in my retirement life as perhaps Gary is with his. I'm still sort of work in progress.
Well, that's really important. I think it's a really good point to bring across. And I've been making some notes here, so when we push this, advertise the webinar out, I think there's a couple of key tips I'm going to put in there that will lure people through to hear, because I think awareness is half the battle. If you know what to expect, then you can cope with things better. So there's only one sort of area I think that I'd like to cover. I think it's important. That's the financial aspect. And, we've talked about how early on you started planning, but financial planning and pensions and, what would you talk to yourself 5, 10 years ago, 15 years ago? What would you say around, the financial planning aspect? Because you raised some really interesting points before, Di.
I think for me, being the age that I am and being a woman, we are very much affected by the changes in the state pension retirement age. So when I first started making my retirement plans, bear in mind that's my husband's
Yeah.
profession, you know, it was based very much on the final salary pension scheme that I was in with Talis,
Yeah.
and when am I likely to retire, and what other investments we might make in the meantime. And of course, so you make those decisions, and even when you choose, I mean, Peter thought I was nuts leaving my job with Fascio, with the final salary pension scheme and all the benefits that went with it, to move to the Security Institute, where there was no pension scheme and there was no benefits and whatever, because it was a startup organisation and there was no money in the bank for those sort of things.
Yeah.
So it was a financial risk, if you like. And for me personally, you know, I'm not on the state, I haven't got a state pension yet because I'm too young. It's not often I can say that.
I was going to say
happy
that.
days,
No,
you know. And so the financial aspect of it has been really important to me. You know, I chose to reduce my working hours back in 2014, and I was very lucky that the Institute valued what I was doing and reorganized their staffing model so that I could stay with a part-time role that was still contributing. But I took a pretty hefty salary hit at the time, because I didn't just knock 2 days worth of work off. I moved into a different role that was, you know, salaried at a different level, quite rightly so, although, you know, and that was part of my decision. So I've been getting ready for full retirement, if you like, since 2014, learning not to spend so much. Okay. But for me, the opportunity, if you like, that my mum and dad gave me was, you know, when mum passed away and the sale of our house meant that there was that safety net, a financial safety net, that if my pension arrangements didn't allow me to live the life that I wanted to live, there was a bucket of money there that I could use if I wanted to, but also I could go back to work. You know, just because you choose to retire, you know, no one's made me retire. So if I wanted to go back or needed to go back to get some more money, then that is always an option.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It doesn't like you cross that line, you can't go back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So, you know, I'd like to think that somebody might want me back. Who knows? Maybe they don't.
Yeah.
But, you know, I've only got another couple of 2.5 years to go before I'll get a state pension. But money, to be honest, it is tight, you know. But, you know, my mum always used to stay at home and economise. Okay, I'll do the best I can. But it is a consideration. But it shouldn't, you know, if you can afford to do it and you want to do it, because you can always go back out and work again. Is kind of where I'm coming from.
I mean, I do want to reiterate that the Institute did have a pension scheme in the end. At the very beginning, it didn't, but you did have there was nest pensions. Now, how did that work? Do you, I mean, please, I don't want to overstep here, but so you retired now, your nest pension, is it difficult to cash that, the process of? To be honest,
I haven't, I'm lucky that I haven't had to cash it yet. So, you know, working for Talis and having a final salary pension scheme for the number of years that I did, you know, at the time you're thinking, oh, for God's sake, I don't want to be, you know, I'm young, you know, money is tight, you know, I want to go and do X, Y, Z. And of course, you know, Miss Captain Sensible that I'm married to is like, no, you know, you're going to invest in this and do whatever. And he's dead right, because now it's you know, it's real dividend to us to be able to have the freedom and book the, dare I say it, 4 holidays that I've got booked for this year. It isn't the worry, you know, it's given me options, it's given me choices. I have a number of small pensions sitting there. Of course, one of the things I've got a spreadsheet. Of course, I've got a spreadsheet. It's brilliant.
Of course you have.
So for several years before I retired, I was tracking where does my money go. So I felt confident that I knew where it was going, because otherwise it just disappears. But also, how much do you need to live realistically? And now I've got the fun of, you know, if somebody puts the bank rate up and a building society offers you a fantastic, you know, 3.8%, you know, immediate access money, I can play at all that sort of stuff and move my money around. again, with a lovely little spreadsheet and all sorts of bits and pieces going on. And I enjoy that. You know, perhaps that's part of my mental
Sure.
Contribution to make myself feel better. But yeah, money has been a concern, but will get easier in a couple of years' time when the state pension kicks in. But I do feel sorry for people, women in particular, that haven't had the luxury of starting pensions early like I did, and feel that they haven't got the choice because they can't afford to do that. And I think it's something we ought to be fully aware of.
Yeah, so financial planning early on. I know I have a 20-year-old is already sort of thinking about pensions. I didn't even think about mortgages at 20, so didn't save at all. I think the smart ones are start early, so that when it comes to this, and it comes around quick, I think you'll probably agree, quicker than you might hope. But then you're sitting pretty. But so Gary, what about for you? I mean, how? You're the international playboy, really. That's what I see. Sports cars and yachts.
I've been called many things, Rick, but international playboy is definitely not one of them. Marmite character sometimes, yes. International playboy, no. But in terms of money, I think where I really started concentrating on that was very much when I left the army proper for the second time. I knew then that I had a sort of foundational pension to drop back into, so I'd never be broke again in the sense of really poor, because army pensions are pretty good, or at least were, in my day. But then I knew I was entering the world of anything could happen in the next 24 hours. You never know your job is secure. You never quite know what sort of pension is going to pay out, and you like Di, lots of spreadsheets, but you start thinking about building up your pensions. Fortunately, when I went to De La Rue, they had a defined benefits pension, but that only lasted 2 years before they then went into, contribution. Right. So I had to then start building that up. And then when I moved to the Abbey, that was a defined benefit for a year before it became look after yourself, mate. So I found myself in the last 3 years putting lots and lots of my salary into pension, because I knew what I wanted when I retired. For all my toys and for me, the way I want to live, I knew exactly what I needed. So it's a matter of planning. It is planning, and if you don't understand finances yourself, get some advice. That's the key thing. Don't leave it to lastminute.com though. Start thinking at least 15 years out, really. And if you've left it to the last 5 years, well, you're going to have to put a lot of money away, I think, if you're not careful. I mean, you want in your pension pot, if you've got no defined benefit schemes, you want probably about anywhere between 500,000 and $1 million in your pension pot. You really do, because you are going to struggle otherwise. All right, you might get your mortgage paid off, and that's a huge relief. And that I'm very fortunate that way that mine's all paid off. But you need quite a lot of money in your pension pot.
Top tip, which I'm going to come to next. So, I mean, we've been going for an hour, but that's only right. I normally do 30 minutes with one person. There's two of you, and there's just so much to talk about, and actually far more than I anticipated. There's so many learning points coming out of this. If there was one thing, top tip that you would go back and tell yourself 15 years ago, what would it be? I'll ask Di first. Or Di's still thinking. I think Gary knows. Are you? Go ahead, Gary. Let Di have a think.
Well, I don't know. I think your career's at crossroads, and you can never quite prejudge what turning you're going to take at the crossroads you meet. And I started as early back as when I was 18, because the crossroad I had to take there was: do I go to university, or do I take what was offered to me at the time was a catering management trainee program with Trust House 40? Because, as you know, my very first life was in catering, and I chose what most people thought was the daftest option ever, which was to go for the trainee program. Almost an apprenticeship in a sense, and that's what I did. And so for the next 3 years, I worked in the catering industry before going to Sandhurst. And so that was my sort of formative training, if you like, but it was all catering. Management, yes, but catering. So that was the first crossroads. Now, if I went back, would I change that? Jury's still out. After all these years, the jury's still out, 50-50.
Yeah.
I think it's you do what is right for you at the time. So don't try and second guess. You've got to do what you think is emotionally right. The next crossroads came, really the biggest one came, when I was at my point in the army where I was a year and a half from making lieutenant colonel. So it was 1990-ish, thereabouts.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, what am I saying? Yes, yeah, about that. And do I stay in the army, or do I go and follow my heart's desire, which has always been singing? I'd always wanted to sing, and I got offered. I was starring in a semi-professional production at the time, MC and cabaret, in fact it was, and a guy in the audience sang at Dusseldorf Opera, and came to see me afterwards, and he said he really enjoyed it. And I said, well, you've seen me doing this sort of stuff, but actually I sing opera. Yeah, feeling very grand about things. And I said, really? He said, and he gave me his card. And of course, that was the next crossroads, because the card took me to him. He auditioned me in a sense and said, well, you could certainly make it, and I can introduce you to people.
Yeah.
And within a year, I'd gone out of the army, and people again thought I was completely mad, because I was staff college, so I was in the sort of higher echelons of, getting promoted early. But I threw it all away in some people's eyes to sing. But I got that out of my system. Do I regret that? Well, I regret not having an OBE or a CBE and maybe becoming brigadier. Who knows what might have happened? Fine. The chances of that happening were pretty good. But I don't regret it. No, because I enjoyed what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have become chairman of the Security Institute. I wouldn't have worked at Westminster Abbey. So I would say is, would you, this question, this perennial question is, if you had your time again, would you do anything differently? No. It's just that when you hit those crossroads in your life, be happy with the decision you've taken. And if you do end up years later regretting bits of it, don't, because it's a worthless exercise.
Yeah. So everything happens for a reason. You've had a great path, but just go with the flow.
Absolutely. It could have been so different. It could have been very, very different. But I regret none of it, to be honest. None of it.
No. Di, what would your top tip to yourself be?
I think my top tip would be trust your instinct. If this sounds really, life's too short, but life is too short to not enjoy doing what you're doing. And I'm not saying that I wasn't enjoying myself at the Security Institute when I was hurt. I absolutely was. But physically, I was finding it very, very difficult. And that's bound to be having an impact on me, my family, my work colleagues, the people I talked on the phone, all of this great good stuff. And so, don't be afraid to say enough is enough. And if you've made the wrong decision, then there's usually options open to you to actually say, well, do you know what? I'm going to come back, or I'm going to go and work in Morrison's as a shelf stacker, or I'm going to do garden design, because I got a qualification in that.
Right. Yeah.
But so trust your instincts, and if you find you can afford to do it and you want to do it, then do it. I was lucky. I had the support of you and the Institute, which I'm very grateful for. I had support of Peter, and my family and friends. They were all clamoring for me to be retired, because they were all older than me. We couldn't do what we wanted to. We couldn't play bridge on a Tuesday because I was still working on a Tuesday and all that sort of stuff. So you just find that confidence. I've never been very good at planning my career. I've always envied people that have had a career pathway plan and have moved from job to job. I've been here 4 years, it's time to move on, and all that stuff. I feel I've just drifted through my career, and I've been very fortunate in the opportunities that have come my way. But it's just, if it feels right for you, then make it happen. Don't be frightened to give it a go.
Absolutely.
I think you've both actually followed your instinct and an emotional instinct, as opposed to anything other. Like, neither of you have been financially driven. It's been about your purpose.
Yeah.
And that's come thread through this whole talk, has been your purpose is something which, thankfully, is something you don't lose when you lose a job. You have your purpose. So it's been a pleasure to have two friends and a conversation like this that will benefit a lot of people that will watch it. I think everybody will be delighted to see how well you both look, and that you are happy in what you're doing is inspirational. So I'm so grateful for your time. We've been on for a while, and I will hopefully see you face to face in the near future. But this has been brilliant. Any last thoughts? No, I think.
How do you make your beard red? How do you make your beard red?
I don't know. I'm thinking about how I stop it going white, Gary. This maybe you're not the person to ask. Right. Well, thank you very much. Some of us have to go back to work. You go back to doing whatever you're doing today. And I thank you so much again for your time. We'll post this up. It'll be out on Friday week.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Lovely to see you, Di.
Yeah. Take care of yourselves.
You too.
Cheers. Bye now.